It was a sweltering Thursday in July when instinct tugged me home. The office had been unusually quiet, the clacking of keyboards and the hum of air conditioners failing to distract me from the gnawing worry in my chest. My husband, Daniel, had called in sick that morning, his voice strained, claiming he couldn't make it to his meeting. He rarely fell ill, and when he did, it was nothing a few painkillers and some sleep couldn't fix. Still, something unsettled me. At precisely noon, I closed my laptop, slipped my bag over my shoulder, and told my assistant I'd be back after checking in on him. The drive home was short but filled with unease. The sun glared down, blinding and oppressive, as if the universe itself wanted to prevent me from going where my heart insisted. When I pulled into the driveway of our ivy-clad house, everything seemed deceptively calm. The garden Daniel loved was blooming with bright roses, the porch swing swayed gently in the hot wind, and our curtains were drawn as usual. Nothing about the scene suggested the unraveling that was moments away. I turned my key softly, not wanting to disturb him if he was asleep. The house smelled faintly of his cologne, the one he wore for important meetings, which was odd for a sick day. My heels clicked quietly across the hardwood as I moved toward the living room. That's when I heard it, the low murmur of voices. Daniel's voice, deep and familiar, carried a warmth I knew well, but it wasn't directed at me. The second voice, however, was sharp, feminine, and chillingly intimate. My heart pounded against my ribs, a wild drumbeat as I froze mid-step. I pressed myself against the wall, every nerve straining to catch the words filtering through the crack of the slightly ajar door. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Daniel said, his tone almost proud, as though betraying me was an achievement. "Of course she doesn't," the woman replied, her laugh dripping with mockery. "She thinks you're the devoted husband. Poor thing." My breath caught. The walls of my world tilted, spinning around me in a blur. My husband, my Daniel, the man I had built a life with for nearly a decade, was speaking about me like a naive fool. I wanted to burst in, to scream, to demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. The woman's voice lowered, seductive and commanding. "We just have to hold out a little longer. Once everything is in place, she won't even know what hit her. And then, Daniel, you'll finally be mine." I bit down on my trembling lip to stifle a cry. My palms were damp, my body frozen between fight and flight. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, each second a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I had come home at noon to care for a sick husband. Instead, I found myself eavesdropping on a secret that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. I don't know how long I stood there, rooted to the spot like a ghost haunting my own home. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to slam the door behind me and never return, but another part of me, the betrayed wife who still craved answers, clung to the shadows, desperate to hear more. Daniel's voice, so achingly familiar, took on a tone I had never heard before. "She trusts me completely. I've been careful. She doesn't even question the late nights anymore. I tell her it's work, and she nods like the loyal little wife she's always been." The words pierced me deeper than any knife could. Loyal little wife. That was what I had become to him. A naive, obedient figure, useful only because I never asked questions? My stomach churned, ball rising, and I pressed a trembling hand against my lips to hold back a sob. The woman laughed again, and the sound was like nails scraping across glass. "Well, she should thank you. At least for now. She still gets to live in her pretty house, wear her designer clothes, and play the role of the perfect spouse. Once we're through, she won't have anything left." My breath caught in my throat. They weren't just mocking me, they were plotting against me. The room spun as realization seeped into my bones. This wasn't just an affair. This was betrayal laced with calculation, something darker and more deliberate than I had ever imagined. I leaned closer, my ear nearly pressed to the wooden doorframe. "We need to time it right," Daniel whispered, his tone urgent now. "If we rush it, she might get suspicious. But once the transition happens, the company will be in my hands. She'll be out of the picture, completely." The blood drained from my face. My company. My family's company, the legacy my father had left me. A legacy I had worked tirelessly to protect and grow after his death. Daniel wasn't sick. He was conspiring with another woman to strip me of everything. I staggered back, my heel catching on the rug, and for a terrifying second, I thought I had made a noise loud enough to betray my presence. My pulse thundered in my ears as I pressed myself flat against the wall, praying neither of them would come to check. Inside the room, their voices dropped, replaced by a silence so heavy I thought I might suffocate in it. Then came the sound of fabric rustling, a faint gasp of laughter, and Daniel's low murmur of affection. They weren't just scheming together. They were tangled in something physical, intimate, and revoltingly real. The weight of it crushed me. My knees buckled, and I slid to the floor, every ounce of strength draining from my body. I stared blankly at the polished hardwood beneath me, the reflection of the chandelier blurring through tears I could no longer hold back. At that moment, I knew life as I had known it was over. The man I had loved, trusted, and devoted myself to had become a stranger plotting to ruin me while I was busy loving him. And the worst part? I still couldn't move. I don't remember how long I sat there, pressed against the cold wall, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. The laughter inside had dulled into murmurs, the kind of private whispers reserved for lovers. My chest tightened with every word I couldn't quite hear, torn between the unbearable pain of knowing and the haunting curiosity of what else they planned. Finally, I forced myself to stand. My legs trembled like brittle branches in a storm, but I steadied myself against the wall and drew in a shaky breath. Leaving seemed impossible. My purse still lay on the kitchen counter, and if Daniel or his accomplice saw me, the fragile mask of ignorance I now wore would shatter. I needed time to think, to plan. Slowly, I crept backward, careful to avoid the spots on the floor that groaned under weight. When I reached the kitchen, I grabbed my purse with trembling hands, but instead of walking straight out the front door, I froze. Some stubborn part of me wanted proof. Evidence. A weapon to use when the time came to confront him, or to protect myself from whatever trap they were weaving. My gaze flicked to my phone. With a quiet prayer, I turned on the recorder and held my breath as I retraced my steps toward the living room. I dared not peek through the door, but I slid the phone close enough that their voices carried into the microphone. My palms were slick, my pulse erratic, but I forced myself to stay still, clutching the strap of my bag so tightly the leather dug into my skin. Inside, Daniel's voice grew louder. It's all about timing. Once the documents are signed, she won't be able to contest it. Her father trusted me, and the board trusts me too. Everyone thinks I'm the devoted husband. He laughed, and the sound was hollow, cruel. The woman hummed in satisfaction. And once she's out of the way, we'll finally have what we deserve. Power. Money. Freedom. I swallowed the scream clawing at my throat. Out of the way. That phrase clanged in my head like a warning bell. Were they speaking figuratively or literally? My skin prickled with fear. A sudden crash inside made me flinch. Maybe a glass had tipped over. Maybe one of them had shifted too abruptly. I snatched the phone back and bolted into the hallway, my heels clattering now against the floor as I abandoned caution. I didn't care if they heard me anymore. I needed to get out before the weight of their betrayal suffocated me completely. By the time I reached the car, my vision was blurry from tears. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and locked it, my chest heaving with uneven breaths. My hands shook as I ended the recording and saved it, staring at the digital timestamp as though it anchored me to reality. The secret was no longer hidden. I had heard it. I had proof. But I also knew that Daniel was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And now, I was the only one who knew the truth. The drive away from the house was a blur of hot pavement and smeared tears. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached, but I couldn't loosen them, not when every nerve in my body screamed that I had narrowly escaped a trap I hadn't even known I was in. The recording on my phone burned in my purse, a lifeline, and a burden all at once. I pulled over in a deserted parking lot, my breath ragged, my thoughts spinning. With trembling hands, I replayed the audio. Daniel's voice filled the silence of my car, every cruel word cutting deeper now that I wasn't half hidden in fear. She trusts me completely. Loyal little wife. I flinched. Then the woman's mocking laugh followed, sealing the wound. And finally, the worst part, the proof of their scheme to take everything my father had entrusted to me. For years, I had believed in Daniel. I'd introduced him to my family's world, opened doors for him, defended him when others doubted his loyalty. He had been the man I thought would protect me. Instead, he was the one sharpening the knife. The shock gave way to fury. My tears dried, leaving only the hollow burn of betrayal in their place. I had evidence now, but what was I supposed to do with it? Run to the board and expose him? File for divorce and start a public scandal? Or keep quiet, bide my time, and strike when the opportunity was right? Every option came with risk, and Daniel was calculating enough to turn the narrative against me if I made a single mistake. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me so badly, I nearly dropped it. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, my heart hammering, torn between answering and letting it ring out. If I answered, would my voice betray me? If I ignored him, would he suspect I knew something? After 3 rings, I forced myself to swipe. Hey, his voice came, feigning weakness, dripping with the same false concern he'd used that morning. Where are you? I thought you'd be at the office. My throat constricted. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my tone. I had to step out for a bit. Just errands. A pause. I imagined him narrowing his eyes, searching for cracks in my words. You didn't come home, did you? My stomach clenched. He was already suspicious. I managed a soft laugh. No, why? Should I have? Silence. Then a smooth chuckle. No, of course not. Just wondering. I'll see you tonight then. He hung up before I could reply. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. He knew something. Or maybe he just sensed my shift. Either way, the game had changed. For the first time in my life, I realized I couldn't trust the man lying in my bed. And worse, he might already know he couldn't trust me. The rest of the afternoon dragged like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. At the office, I pretended to work, though every file on my desk blurred into meaningless shapes. I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept replaying Daniel's words, the woman's mocking laughter, and the chilling phrase, out of the way. By evening, I forced myself to drive home. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway, wondering if Daniel would be waiting for me with suspicion in his eyes. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing my mask of calm. If I faltered even once, he would know. When I finally stepped inside, Daniel was sprawled casually on the couch, a blanket thrown across his lap, as if he had truly spent the day sick and resting. He looked up and smiled, the same smile that once melted my heart but now made my stomach twist. There's my beautiful wife, he said, his voice dripping with affection. How was work? It took every ounce of strength not to flinch. Busy, I lied, setting my bag down by the door. How are you feeling? He shrugged. Better. Just needed rest. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, searching, calculating. Where'd you run off earlier? I called, and you sounded distracted. I forced a laugh and busied myself in the kitchen. I told you, errands. Nothing exciting. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel his gaze drilling into my back, as though he were peeling away layers of my soul to see what I was hiding. I held my breath until he finally turned on the television, pretending to watch. Dinner was unbearable. He asked about small things, my meetings, the stock updates, trivial matters, but beneath every word was a tension that neither of us acknowledged. It was like sitting across from a stranger, wearing my husband's face. I answered politely, keeping my voice steady, but inside, I was screaming. When night fell, I retreated to the bedroom, locking myself in the bathroom under the guise of a long shower. My phone trembled in my hands as I replayed the recording yet again, just to remind myself it wasn't a hallucination. Each word confirmed what I already knew. My husband was plotting against me. I caught my reflection in the foggy mirror, eyes red-rimmed, skin pale, shoulders hunched. I hardly recognized myself. Somewhere between noon and now, the loyal wife I once was had died. In her place stood a woman who would have to fight for survival, for her legacy, and for her very sanity. Later, when I slid into bed beside Daniel, he curled an arm around me, his body warm and familiar. To anyone else, it would have looked like love. To me, it felt like a trap. As I lay in the darkness, my eyes wide open, one terrifying truth settled over me. I was sleeping beside my enemy. The next morning, Daniel was already dressed when I woke. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie, his reflection calm and polished, as though the man whispering betrayal yesterday had never existed. He caught my gaze in the mirror and smiled warmly. "Morning, love. Sleep well?" My lips parted, but the words tangled in my throat. How does he do it? How does he play the role so flawlessly? I forced a nod.
Fine.
"You? Better," he said smoothly, stepping over to kiss my forehead. His lips were soft, his cologne sharp, but I felt nothing but revulsion. "I'll be late tonight. Big meeting with the board." The mention of the board made my stomach lurch. Was this the meeting? The one where my inheritance would quietly slip from my hands into his? I managed a faint smile. Good luck. Once he left, the house felt cavernous, every tick of the clock reminding me that time was running out. I sat at the dining table with my phone, scrolling through my contacts. Who could I trust? My father's old lawyer? The board members who claimed loyalty, but might secretly favor Daniel? Even my closest friends had Daniel already spun lies about me to them? I decided on silence, for now. Exposing him too soon would risk everything. I needed more. More evidence.
More time.
And most of all, a plan. That afternoon, I returned to the office, but paranoia clung to me like a second skin. Every coworker's glance felt loaded, every casual conversation suspicious. Was Daniel already laying the groundwork, planting seeds that I was unstable, unfit? My father had always warned me. Power makes enemies in places you least expect. By evening, when Daniel still hadn't returned, I paced the house, restless and on edge. I checked the recording again, ensuring it was backed up to the cloud. If something happened to me, I wanted proof to outlive me. The thought sent a chill racing down my spine. If something happened to me. The front door opened close to midnight. Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped his jacket over the chair. "Long day," he sighed, moving toward me with practiced weariness. "How was yours?" I plastered on a smile. "Quiet. Just paperwork." He studied me, his gaze sharp even in exhaustion. "You've been different lately. Distant." His hand brushed my cheek, tender on the surface, but I felt the weight of unspoken questions beneath it. "I'm just tired," I whispered, stepping back. His eyes narrowed, but he let it go, turning toward the kitchen. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day." As he disappeared down the hall, I sank into the couch, my pulse racing. He was watching me, closer now than ever before. The mask I wore was cracking, and Daniel was beginning to see through it. If I slipped, even once, I knew he would destroy me before I ever had the chance to expose him. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, Daniel's words replayed in the darkness. "She won't have anything left." Out of the way. I woke in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, listening to his steady breathing beside me, and wondered how many lies he had told with that same innocent rhythm. The next morning, I made coffee in silence, my mind spinning. Daniel strolled into the kitchen, his shirt crisp, his demeanor casual. He kissed my cheek as though nothing had shifted between us. "Don't forget," he said, "the gala's this weekend. You'll need to wear something stunning. We have to keep up appearances." Appearances. The word echoed bitterly. To him, I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a prop, a shield of respectability, while he schemed behind my back. I forced a smile, nodding, and he left with his briefcase in hand. The moment the door shut, I exhaled shakily and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, Mr. Harris, my father's trusted lawyer. My voice shook as I explained only part of the truth. I think Daniel may be planning something with the company. I need you to look into the board documents, the shares, everything. Harris was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came steady, measured. Your father always believed in you, not your husband. Don't worry, I'll review everything. Discreetly. Relief washed through me, but it was short-lived. That evening, Daniel returned home early, too early. My pulse jumped as I heard his keys at the door. I slid my phone under a stack of papers just before he walked in. He studied me with that unnerving calm. Who are you talking to? The question hit like a blow. My mouth went dry. Just a vendor. About the gala. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Funny. I thought I heard you say documents. My heart nearly stopped, but I laughed softly, masking the panic clawing at me. Catering documents. Seating arrangements. Honestly, Daniel, you're paranoid. For a long, tense second, he just stared at me, his gaze searching my face. Then, finally, he smiled, a cold, deliberate smile that never reached his eyes. Maybe you're right. The evening passed in unbearable slowness. Every word exchanged felt like a test, every glance a probe into my soul. I excused myself to the bedroom early, closing the door and pressing my back against it, my breath ragged. Later, as I lay awake, I heard him on the phone in his study. His voice was low, urgent, but the walls carried enough for me to catch fragments. She suspects, tighten the timeline, no mistakes. My blood ran cold. He knew. He didn't have proof yet, but he sensed my shift. And now, the game wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. By Friday, the tension in our home was unbearable. Daniel's every glance felt like a blade grazing my skin, sharp but not yet cutting. He was watching me, I knew it, measuring my every word, every movement, waiting for me to slip. At work, whispers had started. A colleague approached me cautiously, eyes darting around before lowering his voice. Is everything all right? Daniel mentioned you've been stressed. Distracted. The world tilted. Daniel was already poisoning the air, planting seeds of doubt before I even had a chance to defend myself. My forced smile felt brittle. I'm fine. Just overworked. But inside, fury boiled. He wasn't only after my inheritance. He wanted to shatter my reputation, my credibility, so no one would believe me when the truth came out. That evening, I returned home to find the dining table set, candles lit, and a bottle of wine already breathing. Daniel emerged from the kitchen, his charm dialed up to its highest setting. Surprise, he said warmly. I thought we deserved a little less time. It feels like we've been distant lately. My heart hammered. It was a performance, just like the gala, just like everything else. But I couldn't afford to show fear. I forced a smile, sat at the table, and let him pour me a glass. His eyes lingered as I lifted it, and a thought stabbed through me. What if he's trying to drug me? I set it down, pretending to be distracted by the food. It looks amazing, I said lightly, pushing the glass aside. Throughout dinner, he asked careful questions, his tone affectionate but probing. You've been making calls lately. Anyone important? I feigned confusion. Just the usual work stuff. His smile never faltered, but his knuckles tightened around his fork. You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? Of course, I lied, holding his gaze. The silence between us was a chessboard, each move calculated, each word a strategy. He was testing me, and I was learning just how dangerous he truly was. Later that night, as I pretended to sleep, I heard him slip quietly out of bed. My breath caught as his footsteps padded down the hall. Curiosity clawed at me, and I crept after him, barefoot and silent. From the crack of the study door, I saw him hunched over the desk, papers spread out, documents stamped with my family's company seal. His voice was low but fierce as he spoke into the phone. Everything will be finalized by Monday. She won't know what hit her. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. I stumbled back, covering my mouth to smother a gasp. Monday. That was the deadline. In 3 days, I would lose everything. And judging by the steel in his voice, Daniel wasn't planning to leave me with even my freedom. The weekend passed in a haze of dread. Every hour that ticked by was a countdown to Monday, the day Daniel planned to strip me of everything my father had left me. He didn't know I had heard, didn't know I had recorded his betrayal, but his eyes tracked me constantly, sharp and calculating, like a predator circling prey. The gala on Saturday was the cruelest performance yet. We arrived arm in arm, smiling for cameras, mingling with colleagues and board members, as though we were the perfect couple. Daniel charmed everyone with his easy laugh, his polished words, his subtle displays of affection toward me. To the crowd, he was the golden husband. To me, he was a viper in a suit. At one point, I excused myself to the restroom and leaned against the cool marble sink, struggling to breathe. My reflection stared back, pale and weary, eyes shadowed by secrets. I wanted to scream, to expose him right there in front of everyone. But I couldn't, not yet. Harris had promised to send me updates, and until then, all I could do was endure. Sunday was worse. Daniel stayed close to me all day, shadowing my every move. When I reached for my phone, his gaze flicked to it. When I stepped outside for air, he followed minutes later with a casual smile. It was suffocating, like being locked in a cage with a man who already held the key. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I clutched my phone under the pillow, the recording my only shield. My mind raced with possibilities. Should I confront him with it? Should I take it to the board first thing in the morning? Or should I go to the police and risk the scandal? I must have dozed off, because the next sound I heard was the faint creak of the floorboards. My eyes snapped open to see Daniel standing at the edge of the bed, my purse in his hands. My blood froze. "What are you doing?" My voice was sharp, trembling. He didn't flinch. He smiled, slow and sinister. "You've been hiding something, love." I thought I'd take a look. I lunged for the purse, but he pulled it back, his grip iron-strong. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. If he found that recording, it was over. "Give it back, Daniel," I hissed. He studied me, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of having cornered me. "Why so protective? What could you possibly have in here that you don't want me to see?" For a long, tense moment, we struggled silently, the weight of our secrets pressing down on us both. Then, mercifully, the phone buzzed. Harris's name lit up the screen. Daniel's eyes flicked to it, and suspicion darkened his face. I snatched the purse from his distracted grip and clutched it to my chest, my voice shaking. "Enough. Tomorrow, everything comes out." His smile vanished. The mask slipped. For the first time, I saw the raw menace in his eyes, stripped of charm. And in that moment I knew Monday wouldn't just decide the company. It would decide whether I lived to see another day. Monday arrived like a storm cloud pressing against my chest. I barely touched breakfast, my hands trembling as I buttoned my blouse. Daniel was calm, too calm, sipping his coffee with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He knew something. I knew something. We both pretended otherwise. By 9, we were seated in the boardroom, surrounded by polished mahogany and sharp suits. The air smelled of leather and tension. Daniel sat at the head of the table beside me, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He looked every bit the confident executive, the man ready to seize power. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began smoothly. "Today marks a new chapter for this company, and with your approval, we'll finalize the transition documents." My pulse roared in my ears. Transition documents. My father's legacy, everything I had worked for, sliding into his hands. My breath hitched, but before Daniel could continue, I stood. "Before we proceed," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "there's something the board needs to hear." Daniel's head snapped toward me, his smile tightening. "Darling, this isn't the time." "Yes, it is." I cut in. My fingers shook as I pulled out my phone. With one tap, the recording filled the room. Daniel's voice echoed against the walls. "She trusts me completely. Loyal little wife. Once the documents are signed, she'll be out of the picture." Gasps rippled through the boardroom. Faces turned, eyes widening in shock and disgust. And then came the woman's mocking laugh, sealing the betrayal. Daniel lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, holding it high. "This is who you're trusting with my father's company," I said, my voice breaking but strong enough. "A man who plots with his mistress to strip me of everything." The room erupted in murmurs. Mr. Harris, seated at the far end, rose and cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the documents Daniel submitted. They were fraudulent, designed to transfer full ownership under his name." He laid a file on the table. "Here is the proof." Daniel's mask cracked, fury twisting his features. He turned on me, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this." But security was already moving, summoned by Harris beforehand. They stood at the door, blocking his escape. For the first time, Daniel looked trapped. I drew in a shaky breath, my chest heaving. "No, Daniel. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for who you were sooner." The board voted unanimously to strip him of authority. His mistress's name surfaced, and within hours, the scandal spread beyond the walls of the company. His charm, his lies, his carefully crafted image, all unraveled in the light of truth. By evening he was gone. Out of the house. Out of the company. Out of my life. I stood alone in the quiet of my office, staring out at the city lights. My heart still ached, the betrayal raw, but beneath it was something stronger. Freedom. At noon, I had once come home to check on a sick husband and overheard a secret that destroyed everything. But as the sun set on this day, I realized something else. It hadn't just destroyed me. It had freed me.